Imagine, if you will, sealing yourself inside a pitch-black, floating wooden barrel. And this is back in 1775. You are just desperately hoping you don't run out of oxygen before you can crank this manual propeller and attach a bomb to a British warship.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely terrifying, honestly.
Right. Or, okay, picture yourself decades later braving these sleet-filled, icy waters in the depths of the Great Depression. But you're not doing it for survival. You're doing it just to race a yacht.
Which is wild. But, I mean, those extremes really highlight just how drastically our relationship with the natural world can swing over, a few centuries.
They really do. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a massive 400-mile journey down the Connecticut River today. We're starting way up at the Canadian border and flowing all the way down to Long Island Sound.
It is a massive stretch of water.
It is. But here is the catch for you listening. We are tracing the entire geographic and historical evolution without ever leaving a single building in Essex, Connecticut.
Right, which is just an incredible concept. You're basically condensing the entire life cycle of a major waterway into one physical location.
Exactly. And our guide for this temporal road trip is Louis. He's a writer over at the Red Solo Traveler blog, and his piece is called Drifting into the Connecticut River Museum. But this isn't just, a passing tourist review.
No, not at all.
Louis has visited this spot more than 5 times, so we're really looking through the eyes of a regular who has spent serious time absorbing what this place actually represents.
And having that repeated exposure is so crucial, I think, because grasping the significance of this museum requires understanding the foundational role of rivers themselves.
Oh, totally.
A river isn't just a geographic feature. It is a mechanism of civilization.
Yeah.
I mean, it dictates settlement patterns, it provides kinetic energy for industry, and it acts as a central artery for commerce and military power.
It's the lifeblood of everything around it.
Exactly. And this specific 400-mile waterway tells a definitive American story. It's this cycle of natural harmony, intense industrial exploitation, and ultimately environmental redemption.
Okay, let's unpack this. Louis starts his visits by walking right into the physical exploration of the museum's first floor. And that drops you straight into that era of natural harmony. We were looking at a time spanning thousands of years when this river was carved out and utilized by indigenous tribes.
Right, establishing the geographic and cultural foundation of the entire region. The source actually highlights specific tribes whose territories flanked or spanned the river.
Yeah, let's name them.
So you had the Tunsis, the Quinnipiacs, the Hamanasets, the Podunks, and the Agawams.
And if you grew up in Connecticut or even just spent some time driving through, those names are not just historical footnotes to you. I mean, you see those names everywhere. On high schools, town lines, state beaches.
Right. The linguistic footprint is permanently baked into the modern map.
It really is. But back then, the river was the complete center of gravity for these communities. I mean, it provided a steady caloric baseline with the fish, a massive transportation network, and clear territorial boundaries.
Yeah, it functioned as a sustainable, closed-loop ecosystem. The human presence was fully integrated into the river's natural cycles. But, that equilibrium fractures completely in the 1600s.
Right, with the arrival of the Dutch and English explorership.
Exactly. That changes everything.
This is where the river stops being just a habitat and becomes a geopolitical asset, right?
Precisely. Because those European ships represented the intrusion of a global mercantilist economy. Now, initially, there were instances of mutually beneficial trade, but the sheer economic weight and the technological disparity of the colonizers rapidly eroded that dynamic.
They weren't there to integrate into the ecosystem at all?
No, they were there to extract from it and control it.
Control the main artery, control the entire organism, and those ocean-faring ships coming inland needed deep enough water to navigate, but they also desperately needed safe harbor.
Which creates a massive logistical domino effect.
Right. You have these ships surviving a brutal Atlantic crossing, navigating up this river, and they inevitably need repairs.
Which sparks the whole shipbuilding boom. I mean, a river provides timber from the surrounding forests, plus you have sheltered, calm water away from ocean storms. So repairing ships naturally evolves into just constructing them from scratch.
So you have this quiet waterway suddenly turning into a massive industrial construction zone.
A highly militarized and commercialized zone, yeah. Because building ships requires vast infrastructure. You need dry docks, sawmills, foundries, and a highly skilled labor force.
It's a huge operation.
It is. And over the span of a century, that infrastructure compounded. By the time the American Revolution kicks off, the colonies possessed the mechanical capacity to wage war, largely because they had spent 100 years turning this river into a maritime industrial complex.
And that infrastructure gave birth to something on this first floor that completely challenges my mental timeline of technology. I mean, when I think Revolutionary War, I picture muskets and soldiers freezing at Valley Forge. But Louis highlights a replica of Bushnell's turtle on this floor, designed in 1775.
Yes, the world's first operational combat submarine.
The sheer claustrophobia of this thing is just hard to process. We aren't talking about a sleek steel tube here. It is essentially a giant floating wooden barrel.
Literally a wooden cask engineered for underwater warfare. David Bushnell conceived it just a few miles south of Essex down in Westbrook. And the mechanics are just a brilliant, desperate use of available physics.
The museum actually has an interactive touchscreen display so you can understand the engineering. Because
Wow.
looking at the physical replica, you just think, how did anyone survive in this, let alone fight in it?
Right, because it relied entirely on human exertion and mechanical leverage. You have an operator sealed inside, relying on whatever oxygen is trapped in the barrel with them.
Which is terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. And they are operating a foot-controlled valve to let water into a ballast tank just to submerge, then frantically using a hand pump to expel that water to rise back up.
While hand cranking a propeller.
Yes. Meanwhile, they are cranking propellers by hand to navigate in pitch-black water, attempting to auger explosives into the hull of an enemy ship.
Sitting in the dark, underwater, knowing one leaky wooden seal means you drown. The psychological toll is staggering. But, it perfectly illustrates your point about the river's evolution. We've gone from indigenous fishing canoes to weaponized, submersible barrels.
What's fascinating here is that the ingenuity required to build a submersible combat vessel doesn't just vanish when a war ends. It gets redirected.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that intensive engineering culture along the riverbanks laid the groundwork for the explosion of commercial innovation that defines the next chapter of this landscape.
Which takes us up to the second floor of the museum, diving straight into the 1800s. The river is now a full-blown industrial highway. Because before the interstate highway system, before the railroad barons took over, steamboats were the ultimate logistical force.
They conquered the currents. I mean, before steam, moving heavy cargo upriver against the flow was incredibly labor-intensive.
Just a miserable job, I'm sure.
Yeah. Steam power turned the river into a two-way superhighway. It accelerated the movement of freight and passengers exponentially.
And the building housing this museum isn't just holding history, it literally is the history. From 1878 to 1931, this structure was a working steamboat passenger terminal and cargo facility.
That's right.
Louis talks about looking at the miniature replicas of these massive vessels, specifically one called the SS Hartford, which he notes looks almost like a modern cruise ship.
And seeing those beautiful models while standing on the actual floorboards where passengers bought tickets and cargo was weighed, it creates a profound spatial connection. You are occupying the exact same footprint as that 19th century commerce.
I do have to challenge the logic of some of that commerce, though. I understand harnessing the kinetic energy of the river. You set up a water wheel, the current spins it, the gears turn a lathe, and you manufacture goods.
Sure.
But the source lists what they were actually making along this river in rural Connecticut. Piano keys, croquet sets, gimlets, which are those little hand drills, and tusks. How does an elephant tusk fit into a New England river economy?
Now it sounds totally disjointed until you look at the mechanics of global trade at the time.
Okay, make it make sense.
Well, you have this massive, localized source of cheap mechanical power, the water turning the wheels. But you don't necessarily have high-value raw materials locally. So you use those steamboats to import incredibly dense, difficult-to-machine materials from across the globe.
Yeah.
Raw ivory from overseas.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, you bring it up the river, use the water-powered saws and lathes to mill it into luxury items like piano keys or billiard balls, and then ship the finished high-margin products back out to the world.
So the river acts as both the power source for the factory and the conveyor belt to deliver the goods. That's brilliant. And the land was working overtime, too. The source notes a heavy reliance on agriculture, including a massive tobacco industry, some of which amazingly still operates today.
It does, yeah.
But amidst all this grueling industrial labor, Louis points out an exhibit dedicated to something called frostbite racing.
Yes, a fascinating cultural adaptation to the environment.
Wait, so during the Great Depression, people were sailing on this icy river in the dead of winter for fun. I'm struggling to understand the appeal here. You have widespread economic devastation, And people decide the best way to cope is to willingly go out onto a freezing river in small sailboats. That sounds miserable.
The physical discomfort was actually part of the appeal, surprisingly. Frostbite racing originated as a way for die-hard sailors to extend their season. But during the Depression, it transformed into a larger movement. Yeah, it offered a highly competitive, festive distraction from the economic bleakness. Conquering the harsh elements of a sleet-filled river gave people a sense of agency, joy and community when they felt entirely powerless on land.
Battling the weather to forget the economy. It's a powerful image of resilience, for sure. But we also have to talk about the collateral damage of this entire era. The steamboats, the ivory mills, the agricultural runoff. The river was absorbing all of it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see the inevitable crash of unchecked exploitation. The second floor features a sobering look at the severe environmental degradation that occurred.
It got really bad.
The waterway was treated as an industrial sewer. The natural ecosystem that sustained those indigenous tribes for millennia was pushed to the brink of collapse by unregulated dumping and chemical runoff.
But the story doesn't end there, thankfully. Louis highlights that this floor also chronicles a massive 75-year environmental restoration effort. Decades of legislation, filtering out toxins, stopping runoff, and dedicated conservation work to undo that industrial damage.
And reversing a century of toxicity in a 400-mile moving body of water is, it's one of the most complex logistical challenges imaginable.
Absolutely. And this is where Louis drops a critical piece of advice for grasping that immense scale. When you are moving between these floors, especially heading up to the third floor, which houses rotating exhibits like the local river photography he saw in the fall of 2025, he says, do not take the elevator. You have to take the stairs.
Taking the physical stairs fundamentally shifts your perspective.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The walls of both the front and back staircases aren't just painted. They are completely covered in aerial images of the river and the surrounding New England landscape.
It is a brilliantly designed psychological space. By forcing you to physically walk down those stairs, you are visually tracing the river's actual geographical descent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the photos sequence the journey from its narrow origins up near the Canadian border, down through the valleys, all the way to its wide mouth at the Sound.
So you are basically walking downstream.
You are physically enacting the flow of the water. It operates as a visual timeline that correlates with your bodily movement. Louis notes that seeing the vastness of the river compressed into the stairwell motivates you to want to explore the real thing. You grasp the geography in a fraction of the time it would take to actually travel it.
It takes the abstract concept of a 75-year restoration and makes it tangible. You see the sheer volume of water and land that had to be saved. But looking at photos of a clean river while standing in a stairwell only gets you so far.
Right.
The ultimate payoff for this entire deep dive requires walking out the museum doors and getting out on the water.
Transitioning from the curated history to the living, breathing result of that restoration.
Exactly. From late spring through mid-autumn, the museum runs cruises for an extra fee. The steamboats might be gone, but Louis took the midday cruise on a vessel called the River Quest, and he says it's the next best thing.
It's scaled for a much more intimate experience. The boat holds a maximum of 44 passengers, plus the captain and crew.
Which was fully booked when Louis went on a warm, early autumn afternoon. And the atmosphere he describes is just fantastic. The captain welcomes everyone with this great humorous energy.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. You do have to stay seated while boarding and docking for basic maritime safety, but once you are cruising, you have the run of the boat. The lower deck is actually set up with tables, and Louis mentions a lot of passengers bring their own picnics on board.
Eating a picnic on a river that a century ago was choked with industrial waste is a quiet testament to the restoration. But this raises an important question. How do ecologists actually measure the success of that massive cleanup effort?
Good question.
You can test the water chemistry, certainly, but the most undeniable metric is the biology.
The wildlife. If the food web collapses, the river is dead. If the apex predators are back, the river is alive.
And the River Quest is fundamentally a wildlife cruise, proving that the habitat has regenerated.
The crew is incredibly proactive about this, too. They hand out binoculars to the passengers and even give a quick binoculars lesson on how to focus them to spot animals hidden along the banks.
A necessary tool, considering how dense the camouflage can be in that riverbank foliage.
For sure. Louis actually skipped the binocular lesson because he had his camera gear, but he ended up chatting with the captain's wife, who was out there pointing out birds to the passengers. They spotted a great egret, and crucially, they saw eagles.
The presence of eagles is the ultimate indicator of a healthy, robust fish population. And it leads to a fascinating detail Louis shares about the cruise schedule. They run these boats in February and March, specifically for eagle season.
Wait, this completely baffled me at first. Being on a boat in New England in February sounds like signing up for hypothermia.
It really does.
Why would there be a massive influx of eagles in the bitter cold?
It's a localized ecological anomaly driven by temperature gradients. So the river stretches 400 miles north. In the dead of winter, the northern stretches of the river freeze solid.
Capping the water in ice?
Right. Which forces the fish populations to migrate south, seeking open, flowing water just to survive.
Oh, I see.
Essex sits near the southern end of the river where the water remains open. So you have this massive, geographically funneled concentration of fish arriving in this specific area just as the weather is coldest.
It creates a giant natural conveyor belt of food, delivering all these fish right to the eagle's front door.
An absolute feast. The cold weather creates a localized density of prey that attracts eagles in numbers you simply wouldn't see in the middle of summer when the fish are dispersed across 400 miles. Braving the February wind on that deck offers a world-class wildlife viewing experience.
That is an incredible intersection of geography and biology. The ice up north directly powers the ecosystem down south. So whether you're enjoying an autumn picnic or watching eagles feast in the winter, you are witnessing a resurrected ecosystem.
Bringing the entire narrative of the museum full circle. From the natural balance of the indigenous era, through the heavy exploitation of the industrial era, back to a restored, thriving ecosystem today.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Louis has been to this single building over 5 times and still uncovers new layers. The Connecticut River Museum, located at 67 Main Street in Essex, Connecticut, isn't just a repository for old maritime tools. It is a physical timeline of how human ambition, industry, and eventually a conscience shaped an entire region.
It demonstrates that geography isn't static. It is constantly being rewritten by the people who rely on it.
Definitely. And before we wrap, Louis included a brilliant travel hack for you all. You can experience all of this without paying an admission fee. The museum participates in the UNARM program. That's the North American Reciprocal Museum Program.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, if you have a membership to another participating museum in your hometown, you get free entry to this one, along with thousands of others across the country.
A highly practical way to access these critical pieces of regional history.
We love a good travel hack. As we close out this journey, we want to leave you with something to consider about your own surroundings.
Take a look at the bodies of water near your own home. Whether it's the creek behind your neighborhood, a vast lake, a coastline, or just the river you drive over every morning on your commute. If the Connecticut River could morph from a vital resource for indigenous communities into the testing ground for a revolutionary combat submarine, to an industrial engine milling imported ivory, and finally into a recovered habitat, what invisible, layered histories are hiding beneath the surface of the water that you drive past every single day?
It makes that everyday commute look a whole lot more mysterious, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take the stairs, watch for eagles, and we'll see you next time.